Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri. On today's show, we will meet Arjun Padalkar, a business consultant working for Ernst & Young's New York office. Arjun and his team help large organizations assess their current financial and organizational problems and help develop solutions for implementation. He joined EY after graduation from Tufts University at Boston, Massachusetts, with Bachelors of Science in Quantitative Economics and Bachelors of Arts in International Relations, where his studies focused on economic development and policymaking, often with the lens of environmental sustainability. Arjun is a foodie and can travel any distance to enjoy the Indian Alfonso Mango. Hi, Arjun. Welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure and joy is entirely ours, Arjun. Thank you for this time. Arjun, I know I've been knowing you for many years now. Of course, in the recent past, we haven't been in touch in that sense, but off and on, I do get to know the wonderful things that are happening to you in your life as you live in the US. But then, you were born and raised in India, till about 18, 19 years of age, and then you moved to the US for your undergrad study, and of course building a work life there. So why don't we begin our conversation by just kind of understanding, how do you look at your Janma Bhumi, which is India, and your Karma Bhumi, if I can use that word, which is US right now. When you look at these two very distinct worlds, what do you see, and what sort of impact have they had on you as on today?
Yeah, I think of India and my time here definitely as idyllic. Most of the passions and the love that I have for India comes from family and friends, starting off with food, like you mentioned. Every time I come home, the only thing I want is puri bhaji or home food, as I say it. It has such a strong memory in my mind, eating with parents, eating with grandparents, sharing, discussions over the dinner table. India definitely is in that space in my head, spending a lot of time without really thinking too much about it, just living in the moment, going as the days come. Another example is sports. Most of my time growing up was spent either playing badminton, playing chess, or over the few years playing football. Regardless of how hot it was, I would come home sweaty and not really worry about what the next day was going to be. So compared to that now, life was much more relaxed, was much more happy, and focused on things I love doing. I moved to the US in 2017. I was certain that I wanted to go to the US around the 8th grade. And there were many reasons for that. One being that like I said, in India, was not really pushing myself to think beyond. I'd heard from a lot of people that US gives you these open skies and then finding your own footing. And I wanted that challenge of living by myself in a foreign country that I thought I understood, but I wanted to experience it a bit more. A second main reason was academics. As you know, in India, you really need to pick a path that you want to follow. Whereas what I'd been told is that in the US, the sky is yours. You can pick whatever, try a few different things, maybe even take a bartending class, take a class in chemical weapons, but still do a major in quantitative economics. And that really appealed to me because I was very indecisive at the time. And I thought that, maybe I would find my footing there. So that move was really defined by that desire to try a whole host of things and hopefully come out of it with a grasp at
let me just kind of stay back in your India days and just wondering, what sort of dinner table conversations did you have with your parents or folks at home?
That's the one thing I'm very grateful of, that at least with my parents, we had an agreement that we could be all three in separate different locations, but for dinner, we're all on the same table, having the same dinner for about 30 to 45 minutes, regardless of what football match, what game is going on, you're sitting at the table. And I would say the conversations evolved. I definitely decided to get a bit more mature over time. Initially, they would be about my different classes that I was taking, or football or badminton. My parents were really involved with, what my progress was in badminton. So we would have a discussion about, did I play well? Did I not play well? What could I have done better? They would always boil down to some sort of inspirational talk by my parents that they don't admit that happened, but that was definitely one strong subject. Over time, when I started, being more involved with news, it got more in the sense of what the current events were. 2017, I would say, I mean, around the time of, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, as well as with India, with the toss between Modi. There were these questions that were coming up that I had towards them as to, what did they think? Where were they in the political landscape? How did it impact our lives in Mumbai, sitting in, comfort of our own household? So I did notice a change from, day-to-day activities going into a bit more of, world events.
So, on topics which I would like to believe ranged from, let's say, sports to politics to films. I know you are a movie buff, so is your father. He's a great writer. And a whole lot of socio-political subjects. I'm sure it must be intense debates, but the question on my mind is who was talking and who was listening the most amongst the people at home?
I definitely think my dad and I were definitely the most vocal. Mom, by her nature, is more of a listener and then interjects with a very profound thought, especially because of her experience in life. I feel like I have evolved from being somebody who doesn't really speak that much to someone who at times tends to speak a little too much, and then having to backtrack my words with my parents. I feel like I'm definitely the one who speaks with a lot of preconceived notions and a lot of passion first, and then having to have that reality check given by my parents a lot of the time. But I think it was shared. I think each of us have our own niche, which is what I think makes it an interesting trio. Each of us have come from a different angle. I wrote my college essay on our relationship, where dad was always the passionate side of things, telling me to enjoy the finer things, and mom was always the rational, but having that being set in your core values and going in there. So that's always a tussle that I live with, and I have learned to enjoy it a lot more today.
I guess it's an interesting tussle to have, to kind of have both perspectives. But any memories from your school days where something which you remember even now, whatever they could be?
Well, one of the tussle was definitely footballing days. I was a goalkeeper growing up. I was a goalkeeper in football. And I was part of the B team, actually. So we had two teams and I was part of the B team. And over time I got better at goalkeeping, but I was not a stranger to the occasional 9-0 losses on my side. And parents would come with me to these games, and I was always tossing between, it's okay. It's okay to take the loss as long as you understand what you did wrong, but also putting that perspective that, you can't take as much blame on yourself. You need to put that into perspective. You need to know where to improve, but know when to have that self-respect and not to, really take it on yourself, to understand that it's not personal, but it's just part of the game. That's one. But the second side of it is that sometimes you really need that confidence. I mean, even in badminton, a line that dad told me about is, I still remember, is that the reason why there are people are great, and this applies to beyond sports as well, is that reason why your Roger Federers or your Messis or Ronaldos are great is that they can have to take a shot really far back and they need to have that perseverance to take that shot right next to the net and not worry and not have the self-doubt that I'm going to go back to the end of the line and still hit it. You need to play that in your head. And when you touch that shot, you can't congratulate yourself for reaching there. You still need to take that shot. And it only comes with self-belief that develops over time. The reason why they are the greatest is because of that. And you can only learn to emulate them. I don't think that anybody can become that today. So that's definitely one important part.
No, that's one sport, and like any other sport, I mean, it's whilst at one level it is kind of physical, played on the ground, but much is played in the minds of these players. But on various themes of life, I am kind of intrigued and excited about this theme called being at crossroads. Arjun, a crossroad for me is kind of a junction where probably crossroad, which as we call it in India, a chauraha, for example, where four roads meet. So one notion I hold of a crossroad is where four roads meet, which is more a view which is an outside in, Or the other way to look at it, it's a point where you can go in four different directions. So one can look at it from a convergent way or a divergent way. And a lot happens at crossroads. And I think each one of us at whatever age and stage in life we are, I think just as you are, in your mid 20s, so am I in my mid to late 50s, figuring out my own crossroads. But in this life that you have lived both in India and US, I think you have come a long way. And if I were to ask you that, what is a crossroad that you are finding yourself in at this point in time, having done your basic education in India, you did your graduation in the US, you're working in EY, working in a consulting role. What sort of 2 or 3 questions or themes that you are sitting on right now, where you are trying to calibrate your way forward?
Yeah, certainly one of them, and this definitely a byproduct of, like I said, being in that open sky education in the United States, is I've done many different things, worn many different hats, but without really a mastery of any. It's that classic jack of all trades, master of none kind of situation where, I've had a hand at economics, tried a few things in politics, grappling with a few, passions of mine of trying to work in environmentalism, as well as my current job focusing on more, practical everyday solutions. I'm at a crossroads where I'm still figuring out how to balance these passions and how to really act on them. The reason why I'm at this is because I compare myself often to other people who have been, working at something for so long, and I recognize that it takes a long time. But I compare myself to people who've been working at something for so long that they are now ingrained in the field, that they've developed a mastery of it. And I realized that to gain that mastery, I would have to give a lot of time to one particular thing. Whereas I realized that often I like stepping back, pursuing something maybe not academic. So, spending some time doing the things that I like that are not academic per se. So finding how to, perfectly distribute my time is one specific crossroad that I'm at.
There's an interesting non-academic pursuit of yours. You were telling me when we were talking last about a book that you and your friends wrote, which is still unpublished.
Yeah,
in your
absolutely.
college days.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a classic example of that sort of confusion, but still a desire to do well at something. Let's set the scene for it. So it was, towards the end of sophomore year. That's my second year at college. Me and my closest friends were sitting in our dorm, and thinking that everybody else has an internship, something or the other. Why don't we? And after maybe a day's worth of thinking, one of us had an idea saying, why don't we do a trip? The atmosphere was one where Trump had essentially flipped Pennsylvania and had tapped into this unsettlement of people who had lost their jobs, particularly in the manufacturing space. And all three of us were really studying this kind of material where we were studying some kind of politics or some kind of economic fields in that. So we were saying, there's this institute at Tufts that sends sends American folks abroad. Why don't they send a few international folks to America and do a bit of study? So we did kind of a bit of research. We were contacts. We got a meeting with Boston Globe, a prominent newspaper in Boston. And we spoke to Neil Swidey, who's an author of some similar photojournal called The Assist. And he told us that we passed an idea with him that we really wanted to see why people are so dissatisfied with the situation in America. And this is globally as well, but let's focus on America. And we wanted to traverse, the original idea was to traverse the entirety of the Rust Belt, which is sadly enough a derogatory term for towns in America that are left behind due to this globalization, due to this movement of progress. They've lost their jobs to foreign competition, to machines. So we wanted to spend a day at these towns, drive around from New York to Pennsylvania, all the way to Michigan, and then come back. And this guy said, this is rubbish, because what you will end up writing is a fluff piece, and you will only listen to the people who have something bad to say without really understanding who these people are. So he said, scrap this idea, focus on one place, be dead sure that you want to go there, and ingrain yourself, say yes to everything, be it birthday parties, be it backyard cookouts, be it movies, whatever celebration is happening, be a town member. And we were like, okay, yeah, chalo, done. So we spent about a few weeks deciding where to go. We picked this town called Johnstown, Pennsylvania, in the middle of Pennsylvania. It's a town that had significant population loss between about the 1980s to the early 2000s, mainly because they were a steel town. They were a dominant steel town. They were going to be attacked during the World War simply because of how important they were to American industry. And they lost whole lots of people, mainly because of foreign competition, because of improper development. They also faced 3 natural disasters that wiped out 10% of their population, 3 major floods. And we wanted to visit them, stay there. We found an Airbnb, luckily, and we stayed there for a month, and we interviewed everyone we could see. And we asked them, what happened between the early 1900s and now? Where are you today, and where do you want to go tomorrow? And that was essentially the idea of our book.
And that's how the Phoenix of Steel was born.
Exactly. I took on the onus of taking the photographs as well, because I think that's an important part. It was my first attempt at taking any sort of proper professional photography, and we took a photo of nearly everyone we interviewed, be it a mayor, be it a police chief, be it a local citizen in the park on a Sunday. It took photos of everyone, and that's the product.
Projects like these or efforts like these can shake you up in many ways, because here you are visiting a town which was probably the most happening place in that country for decades together. And suddenly, for various socio-political, economic reason, it ends up going the other end of the spectrum as if it's a ghost town, and all those people are kind of struggling to live. So as a participant, observer, researcher, if I can use that phrase, in your various conversations or engagement with the people in this town called Johnstown, Pennsylvania, were there anything that disturbed you a lot? What are those 1 or 2 things that really shook you up in terms of some of your beliefs that you had about America or the way the whole system works?
Yeah, the first one up front is that my naivety about Democrat, Republican, that we pin down everything to, is all of ours. It was all painted by the media saying, it's only the Republicans who are against this. It's only the liberals who are against this, Democrats. They told us it was none of that. They've had Democratic governments, they've had Republican governments. It truly boils down to the fact that nobody, thought beyond tomorrow. They had no long-term vision, be it the government, be it, the post-decline. Nobody was thinking about these people that way. We read these things in the media saying, this is, some government has done this. It's really about those tendencies to really care about your community. But we realized the impact of how deep-rooted a few aspects were. For example, racism. And that's when we really understood, racism is just not, degrading someone because of their race. It's really a systematic problem. One example is that it's like any city, people started migrating out of the city and they started going into these suburbs. And so development and funding was needed for these different suburbs. Now, funding is done through banks, and banks decide who gets a loan and who doesn't. Now, as you can guess by what I'm saying, is that
Yes.
a few suburbs that had particularly mainly, white Americans going in there received a dominant amount of funding. I remember we interviewed a gym owner who, makes the most powerful story of our book. He said that, why does this place get 2 or 3 malls, and whereas we can't even get a simple grocery store?
Yeah.
And they had the collateral to back it. People got back. So these are mainly immigrants in these neighborhoods who couldn't get any access to any funding for years and years. And that causes the systematic and overarching inequality that was the base of a lot of problems that, nobody really addresses. People address it on the surface, but not really, how it impacts equal opportunity. So that was certainly one thing that shook us. It's difficult to read that story that we've written about, how it had to be a community effort and how it is a community effort today to say, okay, we understand it. We are going to do something about it, regardless of what government says. And that's where that Phoenix aspect of this book comes from. It's not,
Correct.
When you look at these towns, you want to sideline them as, okay, they're decrepit, the houses are, in trouble. That's where the Phoenix come in. That's where we, the three of us as writers, have a hope that, this is the way they speak with that conviction is going to be a positive story at the end. And we wanted to be there as the first ones who wrote about it.
So first of all, congratulations to you and your two friends to have even embarked on a journey like this. And when do we get to read that book? What's the plan release?
This is my friends will make a joke about me saying that I've been promising them this for 2 years, a signed copy, but it hasn't come. So the reason is because we want to make it right. So we made multiple edits. We are even reducing the size of the book. So yes. I try to time my visits to India so that I can speak with we've got a really good partner who's printing these books for us, working with us with nice glossy pages and this and that. So hopefully I'm initially going to have 200 copies. We're going to distribute half of a part of them to the institute that funded us, so that we can give it to the hands of people who, professors, speakers, development experts, when they come to Tufts University, instead of giving them some book written by someone else, we want to ensure that the institute who funded us and says, look, your funding to this institute can inspire kids like these to go out into America, ask the tough questions, and make a product that we're working on a year after college. So it's a lifelong learning aspect. So hopefully, I want to say by the end of the year, we'll be able to give copies and definitely have a PDF version for all access to read.
So I'll wait for the day when I get a signed copy from you.
Yes, absolutely.
What an inspirational story here. But I think there is another inspirational experience that you had was studying the migration phenomena, which is another socio-political reality of the world that we live in today. Like it or hate it, that's the reality. And these are refugees, wanting to leave a war-torn region and kind of want to live a better life somewhere. That was an interesting experience. Why don't we have a quick, overview of that too? At this juncture.
Absolutely, and it makes sense also to connect it to Johnstown, because Johnstown experienced a big amount of migration of people outside and for a multitude of factors. But this is actually, funnily enough, a year before I went to Johnstown. I alongside my classmates were in this class called EPIC as a short form. It's a year-long class at Tufts that focuses on one subject, and the focus of this class was migration. Global migration. It was in light of migration crises that were engulfing Europe, due to the Syrian Syrian migrant crisis, Turkey's role in it. But that was just the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
The class made us realize that 3% of the world has been migrating for all of time, and we just know it now. Yeah, because we just know it now because of how politicized it is and how your European role it is. But nobody really talks about, let's say, the scores of south to south migration that's happening. And by south to south, I mean migration within Africa or migration within South Asia, or how impending potential for Bangladeshi migrants that are blossoming due to the socioeconomic conditions in Bangladesh. So the migration that is talked about is when they land up at European shores, but the real ones that we should be talking about is the impact within the South. And that's something that I personally learned a lot. I had the opportunity to moderate one such panel. So the culmination of this class is that in about March, we host something called a symposium. It's available in the institute's website. It's a symposium where we invite speakers on very particular topics. So I had a chance to moderate the topic on how South to South migration is shaping our world. And we had a World Bank economist. We had a South Asian history professor who was able to give that context. We had someone who was able to speak it from the African context. But my classmates posted very interesting discussions about how migration is happening globally. What is the impact economically? One of my classmates had one on how migrants in the Middle East and what that exploitation is happening because of that condition. So it's really a holistic class, and I think more classes should span a year's time, because this is a very big subject, as you can tell.
No doubt. So these are two very, very rich and powerful experiences you carry, and I'm very happy for you that you got the opportunity to kind of study the Johnstown phenomena, as well as the study in Morocco that you did for migration. But if I were to ask you, what is it about Arjun that Arjun learned thanks to this experience that he wasn't aware of?
Yeah.
Kind of a self-discovery in that sense, some kind of a self-discovery there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I learned is, and this ties back to the India-US divide, is that initially I was someone who had to be given material to be learned and then learn it and then answer it in a test. Whereas now if you can call it a test to know what, hurts my heart or wants me to learn more about it, is that when I read something, do I feel like this is an existential problem, or do I feel like this is impacting people that people aren't giving enough attention to? So be it in migration or be it in Johnstown, these are all topics that I found were really relevant, but I had to notice that I had, just reading one set of material is not good enough. Reading just New York Times is never good enough. You need to go out into the field, interview people, understand the diversity of perspectives, and then, document your own growth in learning, because you may think something today, but that thinking has come because of a lot of different factors. You were thinking something else yesterday, and that could have been driven by some article you read or someone's message on WhatsApp or Facebook that it stuck with you. But often you're not using your own voice, and that's something that I wanted to build on. That's something that I'm trying to build on into my future passions. The things that I'm going to be pursuing in the future, at least academically and professionally, is that using different sources of material, spending a good amount of time and tracking how your thoughts have changed in this, and making it a very cognizant effort than just reactive.
I'm reminded about a TED talk which this Nigerian author, I don't know whether you have read her, but I've kind of not follow her, but I enjoy her writing. She's Chimamanda Adichie. I don't know if I've kind of pronounced her right. And she gave this amazing TED talk many, many years back, which left a big mark on me about how there are every story has two sides to it in that sense.
Yeah,
how
absolutely
important. And good old India, they say in villages in India, they say that never make a conclusion unless you have met four people having four different views on the same phenomena. You make your conclusion only after that. So that's so wonderful there. So Arjun, this COVID pandemic has impacted just about every person on this planet. Not just humans, but I think the other living beings too. And nobody has come out unscathed in that sense. I know, where were you during those COVID days? Were you in India, were you in the US, and what mark has it left on you?
Yeah, during COVID, I had the privilege of living with 6 of my closest friends back at Tufts. We had a lovely, like I say, idyllic house with a backyard, 2 kitchens, 2 living rooms, the whole 9 yards. And I decided not to come home to Mumbai, mainly because my grandparents were living with my parents. I thought I could sustain myself living. Plus, I thought it was a good opportunity to take a pause. You mentioned that it affected a lot of people, and a lot of people, I'm assuming, were also in that state of pause in their own homes. So I took it as an opportunity to pause a bit, reflect on a lot of the things that had happened to me at 4 years at college, and had the support of 6 of my closest friends. So I was cooped in our house, and I imagine that time to be very formative for me. There was a lot of things happening, including just the news that you read every day was so dreadful that you had no option but to contend with it, ruminate with it, think about how it impacted you, how it impacted your worldviews. And I took it as a very formative time to just read more, educate myself more on where I'm at, rather than speak. I had a chance to take a pause and just see how I felt about things, try and understand my own voice in it, and really come out of it hopefully a stronger person.
And were there any discoveries of any new direction, any new passion that emerged out of that introspection?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would imagine 2 main things that I did really helped me. One was reading. Funnily enough, it was a book that you gave me that sparked that interest. You had given me Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain,
Yes.
and it kicked off my idea, saying that I think I haven't really been thinking about how other people deal with things. I started that kicked off an idea of reading a lot of autobiographies or just biographies. So that started with Kitchen Confidential by a lovely man, Anthony Bourdain, shares my love for food. But I went into different fields. So I started reading about Jeff Bezos just to see where does his mind come in from. He had an everything store written about. I also read the books about Ansel Adams, a really lovely photographer who's photographed the Half Dome in California.
Yep.
That was one side. I also started reading a lot about just things that I haven't given enough time to. So one book that I highly recommend is Why I Am a Hindu by Shashi Tharoor. It's perfect for a person like me who really celebrates religion only through festivals, but doesn't really understand Hinduism, and is a bit confused by the rise of other people's opinion as to what fundamentalist Hinduism is. He breaks it down effortlessly in very simple terms as to what a buffet of religion it is. It's so welcoming to you don't have to believe in anything. You can be an atheist Hindu to support Hinduism. That was one. Another one was Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells, which really ticked my, I classify it as a horror book, but it's really about our world and how fast climate change is advancing. And it really stoked me into action about what to do. But as you can see, there's a very disparate topics about a lot of really troubling things that touch on very painful aspects. And that's where I started understanding the concept of writing. A lot of my friends do it and it really helps them, which is why I took a page from their book and started writing a lot. And writing not really about anything, but just two different ideas. One is very simple as to how my day has gone in very simple terms, maybe about a page, half a page, just recount the things that I'm grateful for. As my mom says, you need to be very grateful at these times. And second is pin down the root causes of where I felt problems of, so that it doesn't, like I say, bundle up into this massive snowball. And the second was a more top-down commentary about what I feel are very core beliefs or core observations. It doesn't have to be lessons. It can just be things that I have now taken, I now believe are certain. And so these things, these two, balancing reading about others as well as writing about myself, were two big revelations that I still hold on. And I've picked it up again this summer, mainly because I had the chance to come home away from work for about 2 weeks. That, despite from not having to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., gives me that time. And with time, same as COVID, comes that chance to think a bit more sustainably, I would say.
Arjun, and I was reading a biography of a writer, and some of the lines which kind of have remained with me, and they are a part of my book of quotes. And let me read out a line to you as to why this person said, I write. She says, I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see, what it means, what I want, what are my hopes, and what are my fears. That's why I write.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
So let me ask you, what are your hopes and fears that you are working with at this stage and age in your life?
Yeah, certainly one fear, it's a bit that I've grappled with for a while, is that I believe that I have a lot of thoughts at different times, but I find it difficult sometimes to put it under action. And that comes, and I've noticed that it comes because I don't know how far I've come. I tend to negate a lot of the progress that I've made simply because it's in moment in time thinking. Like I said, don't have a collection of what I thought 6 months ago, because it requires a sense of honesty that you need to give for yourself. And I tend to, only when I get that spark do I want to write. But that's not what you should be doing. You should be writing every day, so that even on days you don't feel like saying something, you have a stream of consciousness. So I think that's the reason why I'm not able to put my thoughts or action or passions into action, because I lack that consciousness or stream of thought. And the second one that I think that is also important is that I tend to find a lack of self-respect sometimes, that I see myself, I see my world through other people's eyes rather than my own. And that sometimes takes away the confidence that I could know something completely well, but still stutter or still wonder whether what the other person is telling me is right before I think that what I'm saying is correct. And these two things, I certainly feel like writing is the first step at the solutioning, but it's something that is a work in progress, I would say.
Arjun, sports person or those who pursue perfection, in many ways than one, they tend to be harsh on themselves far more than they should be.
Yeah.
I wonder if you are harsh on yourself far more than you should be.
Yeah, no, I completely feel so. I think that it's happened. Yeah, I notice it in things that I think I'm good at. I'll take an example of photography, for example. I really love it, and I love to see other people's photography, but I tend to be too harsh on myself when I'm unable to get out of my own comfort of my home and photograph the beautiful city outside of me. I've been telling my friends that I live in one of the most diverse cities in the world, both in Mumbai and New York City, but I have very little photos to show for it. Mm-hmm. I have in the moment I'll get a chance, but I won't just do it simply because I have a fear of not getting the best shot or not liking what I take. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it, and it's applicable to many other things, is that you should just do it and then think about it, how it makes you feel after, because you can't be harsh on yourself for something you haven't done. Be that working out, as an example, where sometimes we feel like, why have I not made progress in working out? But you cannot be harsh on yourself if you haven't really tried. If you've tried and you've done it and it's not worked, that's a different story. But not doing it is often the cause of it.
No, I mean, surely I think this happens to all of us. I mean, the self-critique in us is shouting at probably 200 decibels. And the one who is the compassionate self who says, you are good. You are not just good, you are good enough. Unfortunately speaks at about 40 decibels. So, which voice in our head we give more, pretense, importance to is of course important, but I guess we live in a world which, Barack Obama said many years back, I think one of his visits to California, he gave a very interesting talk about the messiness of democracy. He talked about how democracy is messy, and whilst it cherishes a lot of ideals in terms of liberty, equality, brotherhood, fraternity, justice, and so on and so forth. It is a broken system, and it kind of moves from one level of brokenness to the other, to the extent that one might want to lose faith in a lot of things that is happening. And sadly, I think the world that we are living in today, the war in Ukraine, or the lot of unfinished stories from the war in Afghanistan, and a whole lot of other things that are happening, where humanity at a very different level is kind of paying a huge price. That there's a huge cry out, not for the warrior, but probably for the healer, is what I would like to believe.
Yeah.
And somehow, there is a huge possibility of probably getting disillusioned with the world, and it happens to me many a times. I mean, I've stopped reading news. I've stopped getting newspapers in our home for the last 9 years now. We don't get any newspapers because we don't even know. We live in a post-truth world. What is real, what is unreal. The algorithm tells me what's happening in the world, not really me wanting to know. So there are moments of sadness, and I go through many a times as to where is the world heading. And invariably I am kind of drawn to a small kind of a frame that hangs on my wall, which is a work of calligraphy done by a very, very dear friend of Asha and me. She's probably one of the most wonderful calligraphers from India. Not many people know her work, but she kind of gifted me and Asha this her handwritten script on the Desiderata, which if you look up, I mean, there are multiple stories as to what is Desiderata. One version says it's a prose poem written by an American writer called Max Ehrmann. There's another account which says that the Desiderata was found in a church of Baltimore in 1692, written on a old parchment paper. It's a beautiful text which kind of ends in that line, which gives me hope. And I want to read this out more as a little gift from my side to you, from me to you, as a part of this conversation. Is the way Desiderata ends is it says that with all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world.
That's true. Yeah.
So let me wish you, a beautiful, beautiful journey in this beautiful world going forward. And it has been such a joy to have this conversation with you, Arjun. Thank you so much for coming on this show. And as we kind of bring down the curtains on this conversation, just want to ask you, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you saying to yourself? And where has this conversation left you?
No, thank you so much for having me. And as I was telling about you and Asha Auntie about the delight I had for the timing of this conversation, as I'm, like I said, documenting a lot of my thoughts and creating structure around the chaos. I'm definitely, like you said, hopeful that I can, regardless of how busy my day is or how chaotic it is, I understand the importance of taking a moment, maybe 5, 10, and writing it down, because there will be a time when I'll need to read it and understand the progress that I've made, understand how my thoughts have evolved. So I think finding these little crutches to support myself or to heal myself, like you say, are really important. So I think that putting my thoughts down for this podcast as well has helped me contextualize that and be hopeful for the future, that things can go wrong, but it's only when things are good do you need to start preparing for the bad days. So thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
There's this song called "Who is the Harshest Critic in the Room?" I don't know whether you've heard that, but Google it. I think it's been sung by a female artist, Alison Pointier or Alistair Pointier. I don't get her name. So all I can say is, for a moment, Arjun, keep the harshest critic in you outside of you. Pick up a glass of wine and celebrate and enjoy the space that you are in at this moment. So wish you good luck. Wish you good luck.
Thank you so much.
Take care and stay safe. Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.